what is a Death Knight? What level does it start at? It's a hero class, but what does that even mean? What we came to was that the Death Knight as a class, as a hero class, should have a heroic beginning.
We're building a whole starting area for the Death Knight that explains his purpose in the world and sort of where he came from and how he got out from under the Lich King's grasp, and really introduce him to the world naturally.
The reason for Death Knights starting in Eastern Plaguelands is tied to their origin, right? Death Knights in the War III era were created by the Undead Scourge, mortal heroes, whether they were knights or paladins. They weren't expressly all paladins. There's some precedent for, non-paladin heroes becoming Death Knights as well. Were kind of lured to darkness, whether they were frustrated or, just kind of lost heart, or whether they were just disenfranchised and wanted power. Whatever the reasons were, a lot of these mighty dudes, wound up signing on with the Scourge. The Lich King granted them, unique weapons and powers to pretty much be his generals.
We're kind of explaining, whatever happened with Tyr's Hand, because there's a lot of story there that we didn't get into quest-wise. And so now we're starting to get back into that and explain how exactly things happened there and how it moved forward.
Right away, they are told, they are shown, they're given the directive, you are evil, you are going to go do evil things. Your master commands it. Arthas.
Arthas is kind of the, unique example of Death Knights. He was the first. He has Frostmourne, set a precedent for the rune weapons for the class, and ultimately he just kind of, grew darker and darker and graduated, became the first Death Knight, and so I think there are many other mortals that followed in his wake. The quest will illustrate not only, what you can do and what your role is in the world, but it will also begin to tell the story of how you get free. We bring Tyrion Fordring into it, and a lot of the badass paladin characters that are still alive in the setting. And they actually, there's an altercation at Light's Hope Chapel.
Big battle, Mograine, the player, Death Knight forces come up. Light's Hope, we have the Argent Dawn that comes up, and there we have a battlefield situation. And out of nowhere, Tyrion Fordring rides up with his knights. And so between Mograine and Tyrion, we have a huge confrontation in the player. And so we start them out in all-out war. But ultimately, there's a reason Light's Hope is where it is, and there's a reason the Scourge has never been able to take it.
And it pretty much tells the story of the birth of this new order, right, called the Knights of the Ebon Blade, and sets up, your new headquarters and why you guys are a new thing in the world, right? Like, you might be dead and, grim, right? But damn it, you're going to take it out on the Lich King, right, for what he's done to you.
When we think of what character classes can be played by which races, we try to think of it as much as possible in terms of allowing as many as possible, and then only kind of cutting out choices when we need to.
Gnome Death Knights. In fact, in the Friends and Family Alpha, I made the first Death Knight, and it was a gnome.
Even gnomes. I mean, there's something cool to be said about Gnome Death Knights, sort of the I don't know, irony almost. Well, the hero class, I'd say, sets up more of its background than affects its long-term gameplay. Ultimately, the Death Knight needs to be balanced against all the other classes that we have in the game. We've very deliberately set it up so that it's not more powerful than other character classes. Otherwise, what we'd see is every kind of veteran player playing a Death Knight.
Kind of the phrase that we've used in terms of the hero classes is epic but equal. So epic in terms of how you obtain them, epic in terms of how they feel, but certainly not more powerful.
One of our goals for the trees is to not have a tanking tree, to have some cool tanking talents in multiple trees so you don't feel pigeonholed. Like, oh, I took the DPS tree, sorry, I can't do your dungeon group, I can't tank for you.
One of the reasons we kind of decided to do that is we feel like tanks are something that players often need. Players are often looking for tanks for an instance or tanks for any kind of a run. And in terms of the specific type of tank, we don't really have a tank that's specialized in spellcasters.
I think when we start stepping on the warlock's toes or the shaman's toes or the warrior's toes, that's when we start to back off and go, well, how is this guy different? What's going to be cool and unique about him?
So Death Knights have a whole lot of kind of class-defining abilities. Not only is their resource mechanic very different and inherently defines the class in a way that's different than others, they also have some spells that are very mechanically different than other classes. A great example would be the Death Grip that pulls enemies toward you. In addition, we have the ability to raise dead characters. So unlike the Druid's Combat Resurrection, the player that you're animating dead on, that you're raising dead on, is able to actually play as the ghoul. That should be a lot of fun because the ghoul has a host of different abilities. The ghoul can leap, the ghoul can stun, he can do a bleed attack, he can do his normal direct damage attack, he can huddle if he's taking a whole lot of damage to kind of, reduce incoming damage. He can even explode. So once you're kind of done playing the ghoul and you want to go back to getting yourself resurrected, might as well just suicide yourself and blow up and send ghoul parts flying everywhere.
The thing I'm really interested in is the Death Knight. I can't wait to play that.
The Death Knight.
Death Knight.
The Death Knight.
Death Knight.
I really want to play the Death Knight.